Ethan, a black boy, saves a wealthy, elderly woman from a robbery, but what he asks for in return makes her cry. This is a story that will change how you see life. Ethan was 12 years old, but his life already carried the weight that many adults would never know. He lived on the bustling streets of New York, a setting where dreams and disappointments crossed paths at every corner. With his worn-out sneakers and a patched-up backpack containing everything he owned, Ethan spent his days wandering aimlessly, his eyes always alert for any opportunity to earn a few coins. He shyly extended his hand, asking passersby for spare change, who almost never stopped. Many averted their gaze, others frowned in disdain, and only a few offered a smile or a gesture of kindness. Despite this, Ethan refused to give up. He firmly believed that even in the midst of adversity, it was possible to find a purpose. His mother, Sarah, was that purpose. She was seriously ill and lived in a shelter for vulnerable people. Sarah needed expensive medications, drugs that could prolong her life and ease her pain. Ethan didn't have enough money, but that never stopped him from trying. Every day, he faced the cold, hunger, and fatigue with unwavering determination. To earn some money, Ethan collected aluminum cans from the streets and alleys, braving the strong smell of trash bins and the suspicious looks from shopkeepers. He walked long distances to exchange the cans for a few cents at recycling depots. He also did odd jobs whenever he could. He carried shopping bags for the elderly, helped clean store windows, or even handed out flyers in the middle of traffic. He never complained, even when his hands ached from so much work, because he knew that every penny brought him a little closer to helping his mother. There was one line Ethan would never cross. He never stole. Since he was little, Sarah had taught him that honesty was the foundation of everything. Even when hunger gnawed at him, and the temptation to take something from a fruit stand or a bakery was enormous, he resisted. "You are bigger than this, Ethan," Sarah always said with a gentle smile, even on days when illness stole her strength. "Do the right thing, and the right things will happen." Ethan believed in those words as one believes in a map to escape a maze. They were his mother's words, and he would do anything to honor them. On the coldest nights, Ethan curled up in a sheltered corner of a subway station, hugging his backpack as if it were a pillow. He daydreamed of a day when he could buy a house for himself and his mother, a place where she could rest without worries and where he could go to school like other children his age. He also dreamed of becoming a doctor, to help people like Sarah overcome illnesses without relying on money. They were big dreams, but Ethan believed that if he had enough courage and kindness, they could become reality. In the meantime, he continued his daily struggle, facing the world with the strength of someone who, despite everything, believed that tomorrow could be better. Even alone on the cold streets of New York, Ethan carried within him a flame of hope that not even misery could extinguish. The sky of New York was tinged with golden hues that afternoon as the sun began its slow descent behind the skyscrapers. Ethan walked along the edges of Central Park, looking for something he could sell or any chance to earn a few coins. The park was bustling, as usual, with tourists taking photos and joggers in athletic gear weaving around children playing nearby. Ethan was used to going unnoticed, a scrawny boy in tattered clothes that few paid attention to. But something unusual caught his eye. Across a path shaded by trees, he saw a scene that immediately made him stop. An elegantly dressed elderly woman, with perfectly styled white hair, was being grabbed by a tall, strong man. He was trying to forcefully pull her bag away while she struggled, gripping the leather strap tightly with trembling hands. Her screams echoed through the park. "Help! Please, someone help me!" Yet, no one seemed willing to intervene. Passers-by looked away and quickened their pace, pretending not to hear. Others simply watched from a distance, hesitant, as if the scene were part of a movie and not reality. Ethan felt his heart race. He knew he wasn't strong or big, but he also knew he couldn't ignore what was happening. "This isn't right," he thought, clenching his fists. He looked around, trying to find something he could use. His eyes landed on a fallen branch on the ground, thick enough to be used as an improvised weapon. Without thinking twice, he picked it up and started running toward the scene. "Hey, let her go now!" Ethan shouted with all the strength of his lungs. His voice was firm, despite the fear he felt. The assailant turned his head, surprised, staring at the scrawny boy wielding the branch as if it were a sword. For a brief moment, The man hesitated. Perhaps he didn't expect someone so small to have the courage to challenge him. Ethan took a few steps toward him, waving the branch in the air as if he were ready to attack. "I called the police," he lied, his voice filled with determination. The thief looked around, realizing that the attention of the few people in the area was now completely focused on him. Grumbling something inaudible, he yanked the bag away, pushing Evelyn back. "It's not worth it," he muttered before running off through the park, disappearing among the trees. Ethan dropped the branch and ran to Evelyn, who was sitting on the ground, panting and visibly shaken. She held the bag against her chest, as if it were a lost treasure. When she noticed Ethan approaching, she reached out with a trembling hand, gripping his arm tightly, as if fearing he would disappear. "My God, boy, you saved me," she said, her blue eyes misty. "What would I have done without you?" Ethan looked away, uncomfortable with so much attention. He wasn't used to being praised. "I just did what I thought was right, ma'am," he replied, his voice low and shy. "I couldn't let that man hurt you." For a moment, Evelyn just stared at him, as if trying to understand who this brave boy was who risked everything to help her. He was small, thin, and his clothes clearly indicated that his life wasn't easy. Still, there was something in his eyes, a strength that didn't match his fragile appearance. "You're a hero. Did you know that?" Evelyn said, still holding his arm. Ethan shrugged, feeling his cheeks grow warm. "I just needed to do something." Evelyn took a deep breath, trying to compose herself. "Boy, what's your name?" she asked. But before he could answer, a police officer passing through the park approached, drawn by the screams and commotion. Ethan seized the distraction to take a step back. He didn't want to deal with more questions or attention. Ethan was about to disappear into the crowd at the park when he heard Evelyn's voice calling for him, still trembling but insistent. "Wait, boy, don't go away like that." He stopped, hesitating, and looked over his shoulder. Evelyn was already standing, her bag firmly clutched to her arm, and a mix of urgency and emotion on her face. She walked towards him, stumbling slightly, but determined not to let him leave without understanding more about the boy who had risked so much for her. "Please, tell me your name," she asked, her voice heavy with a sincere plea. "I need to know. You did something that no one else has done for me today." Ethan sighed, scratching the back of his neck while avoiding the woman's gaze. He wasn't used to this kind of attention. "My name is Ethan," he replied, with the same shyness he carried in every interaction. "But I just did what anyone should do, ma'am. It was nothing special." "Nothing special?" Evelyn repeated, incredulous. "You faced a man who could have hurt you, or worse. You saved my life, boy." She took a deep breath and reached out to lightly touch his shoulder, as if she wanted to anchor him there, in front of her. "Please, let me do something for you. Anything. Whatever you need." Ethan swallowed hard, surprised by the offer. He lowered his head for a moment, as if trying to decide whether to accept or not. Finally, he raised his tear-filled eyes, which shone in the golden light of the evening. "I don't want money," he began, his voice choked. I just want to help my mom." Evelyn furrowed her brow, intrigued. "Your mom?" she asked, leaning slightly to hear better. "What's wrong with her?" He took a deep breath before answering. It was always hard to talk about it, but he felt he could trust the woman in front of him. "My mom, Sarah, is very sick," he explained, his voice low but firm. "She's in a shelter because we have nowhere to live. She needs expensive medicine, and I try to save money to buy it, but I never manage to get enough." He paused, biting his lip to hold back tears. "She always taught me to be honest and not to steal, even when we're starving. I just want her to be okay." Evelyn fell silent, Ethan's words seeming to echo in her mind. She felt the weight of the boy's sincerity, his maturity forced by the difficult life he led. He wasn't asking for anything for himself, no gifts or rewards, just help to save the woman who meant everything to him. Tears began to stream down Evelyn's face as she processed what she had just heard. She thought about how it was possible for such a young boy to carry such responsibility, such kindness and courage. "My God, Ethan," she whispered, wiping her face with her free hand. "You have more heart than most people I know." She held his hands firmly, ignoring the dirt and the small cuts that marked the boy's fingers. "You saved me today, and now it's my turn to help you. I'll take care of it, I promise. We'll buy the medicine your mom needs. She'll be okay, you'll see." Ethan blinked, surprised by the emotion in Evelyn's words. He felt that there was something different about her, something that made him believe that this was not just another empty promise. "You don't have to do this," he said, although his tone betrayed the hope that was beginning to blossom in his chest. "I want to do this," Evelyn replied, with determination in every word. "And it's not just for what you did for me today. It's because you deserve it. You are special, Ethan. Never doubt that." For the first time in a long time, Ethan felt that he was not alone. And for the first time, he saw a real light in the darkness that was his life. Evelyn insisted with a firm kindness that left no room for discussion. "Please, Ethan, take me to your mother. I want to meet her." Ethan hesitated for a moment, embarrassed to show the reality in which they lived, but the sincerity in the woman's eyes convinced him. "All right," he replied, almost in a whisper. "But the place isn't good." Evelyn simply nodded, with a gentle smile, saying nothing more. They walked side by side through the streets of New York, leaving behind the grandeur of Central Park and entering a neighborhood on the outskirts. The sidewalks were cracked, the facades of the buildings were peeling, and the smell of accumulated garbage was hard to ignore. Ethan seemed unfazed by the conditions around him. It was evident that this setting was part of his daily life. Evelyn, on the other hand, couldn't hide her unease. For someone used to mansions and luxury hotels, the contrast was shocking. When they arrived at the shelter, a small, worn-down building with gray walls and cracked windows, Ethan carefully opened the door. The interior was cramped and stuffy, with a narrow hallway leading to several tiny rooms. The sound of coughs and murmurs came from all sides. Evelyn felt a lump in her throat as she realized how difficult it was to live there. However, she kept her focus on the boy in front of her, who walked with firm steps, as if that environment could not diminish his determination. "And here," said Ethan, stopping in front of an aged wooden door. He pushed the door slowly, revealing a small, almost empty room. A simple bed occupied the center of the space, covered by a faded blanket. Next to it, a plastic chair held some folded clothes and a glass of water. Lying on the bed was Sarah, a thin, pale woman, her face marked by fatigue and pain. Her eyes, though tired, lit up upon seeing her son. "Ethan," she said, her voice hoarse and weak, trying to sit up. But before she could, Ethan rushed to her, gently holding her shoulders. "Mom, please rest. You don't need to get up." Sarah smiled, even as a new violent cough overtook her. "You always worry so much," she said affectionately, stroking her son's face. Evelyn stood in the doorway for a moment, watching the scene. The simplicity of that meeting touched her deeply. Finally, she stepped forward. "Hello, Sarah," she said softly, trying not to startle the woman. "I'm Evelyn Campbell. Ethan saved me today, and I asked to meet you." Sarah looked at Evelyn, surprised and a bit suspicious. She tried to compose herself, adjusting the blanket over her. "Ethan did that?" she asked, casting a loving glance at her son. "He's a good boy. He always has been." Evelyn slowly approached and sat. The next day, Evelyn fulfilled her promise with the efficiency of someone used to solving big problems. Early in the morning, she returned to the shelter with a private driver and a spacious car, ready to take Sarah and Ethan to a place where they could finally receive the necessary care. When Sarah tried to protest, saying she didn't want to be a burden, Evelyn replied firmly, "You are not a burden, Sarah. You are my priority now. We will solve this together." The trip to the clinic was silent, but filled with emotion. Ethan held his mother's hand, as if wanting to ensure she was safe, while looking out the window, absorbing the surreal feeling of being in such a comfortable car. Sarah, visibly weak, leaned her head against the seat, trying to hide the emotion she felt. Evelyn, sitting next to them, observed every detail, determined to change that family's life forever. The clinic was an imposing yet welcoming building, with white walls and light with details that conveyed calm and hope. When they entered, they were greeted by a caring team that had already been briefed by Evelyn about the situation. The doctors and nurses were warm and kind, treating Sarah with the respect and dignity she deserved. Ethan watched everything with wide eyes, trying to process the sudden change of scenery. Sarah was taken to an examination room, where a team began to assess her carefully. Evelyn stayed by Ethan's side, who was visibly anxious, fidgeting with his hands while waiting for news. "They will take care of her," Evelyn said, placing her hand on the boy's shoulder. These people are the best at what they do. Your mother is in good hands. Shortly after, one of the doctors returned to inform them that Sarah would need to be admitted to start treatment immediately. He explained that her condition was serious, but there were good chances of recovery with the right care. Ethan looked at Evelyn, his eyes shining with a mix of relief and disbelief. "Is this really happening?" he asked almost in a whisper. "Is she going to be okay?" Evelyn smiled and crouched down to be at his level. "Yes, kid, she's going to be okay. And you don't have to worry about this alone anymore. We are in this together now." For the first time in a long while, Ethan felt the weight on his shoulders begin to lift. He gave a small smile, shy and hesitant, as if he didn't know if he still remembered how to do it. But when he saw his mother being taken to a comfortable room, surrounded by caring professionals, the smile grew until it lit up his entire face. It was as if a light that had been turned off inside him had been switched on again. "Thank you," he said, turning to Evelyn with teary eyes. "Thank you for everything. I don't even know how I can repay this." Evelyn shook her head and held his hands gently. "Ethan, you have already done more for me than I could ask for. You have shown me the true meaning of courage and kindness. It's my turn to give back." Ethan nodded, emotional, as he looked at his mother, now lying in a clean and comfortable bed, with a peaceful smile on her face despite her fragility. He had never imagined he would see something like this one day. It was a moment he would cherish forever in his memory, a turning point in a life that until then had seemed to know only hardships. In that instant, Ethan no longer felt like a lost boy on the streets of New York. He felt like someone who finally had a chance, someone who believed that perhaps the kindness he had always tried to spread was starting to come back to him. And for the first time, he allowed hope to fill his heart. When Sarah's treatment finally ended, she seemed like a different person. Although she was still thin and fragile, her eyes sparkled with a new vitality, and her smile, once rare, now appeared frequently. Ethan couldn't contain his joy at seeing his mother recovered. The hug they shared on the day Sarah was discharged was so tight that it seemed to hold all the pain and hopes accumulated over the years. But what came next was something that Ethan and Sarah could never have predicted. Evelyn, as was her way, left no room for discussion. "You will live with me while you reorganize your lives," she announced with unwavering conviction. "My house has plenty of space, and I want you to feel like family." Sarah tried to refuse, insisting that they had already received more than they could accept, but Evelyn was categorical. "You are family now, and family takes care of each other." When the car took them to the Upper East Side, Ethan and Sarah were left speechless. Evelyn's mansion was immense, with a classic beige stone facade, large windows adorned with white curtains, and an impeccably maintained garden that looked like it was taken from a movie. Ethan, who only knew the cramped confines of the shelter and the busy streets of New York, felt his heart race. He looked at Evelyn, unsure how to react. "Is this really your house?" he asked, astonished. Evelyn chuckled softly. "Yes, kid, and now it's your house too." As they entered through the front door, the impact was even greater. The entrance hall was lined with shiny marble, and a crystal chandelier hung from the ceiling, illuminating the space with a golden glow. The walls were decorated with artwork, and a wide staircase with a dark wooden railing led to the upper floor. Ethan stood still for a moment, absorbing every detail. He had never seen such luxury. This is huge," he said almost in a whisper. Sarah, on the other hand, seemed out of place. She gripped the strap of her bag tightly, as if trying to anchor herself to reality. "Evelyn, I don't know if we belong in a place like this," she confessed, her voice hesitant. "It's all so different." Evelyn stepped closer and held Sarah's hands firmly. "You belong here because I want you to belong, and because you deserve this. This house is not about luxury, Sarah. It's about safety, comfort, and love. That's what I want to offer you." Little by little, Sarah and Ethan began to adapt. Evelyn made sure they felt at home. Sarah was settled into a spacious, sunny room with a soft bed and a view of the garden. Ethan received his own room for the first time in his life. He didn't know what to do with so much space and spent the first few days just exploring the surroundings, enchanted by every detail, from the white, fragrant sheets to the bookshelf full of books that Evelyn had specially chosen for him. As Sarah fully recovered and helped Evelyn with small tasks around the house, Ethan was enrolled in a nearby school. On the first day, he was nervous, He hadn't studied in years and feared he wouldn't fit in. But Evelyn encouraged him. Kid, you have more intelligence and courage than you realize. You'll do great. Trust me. At school, Ethan faced challenges but also discovered a new world. He loved literature classes, where he could dive into stories as fascinating as his own. He also made friends, something that had seemed impossible for a long time. Each day was a new discovery, and Ethan began to feel that the future was no longer something to fear, but something to look forward to. Meanwhile, Sarah allowed herself to relax and enjoy the comfort that Evelyn offered. She and Evelyn spent long afternoons talking, sharing stories of their lives that were so different yet connected by a bond that grew stronger each day. Sarah, who once felt like an intruder in that luxurious environment, now saw Evelyn's mansion as a home. Ethan, for his part, was changing before their eyes. He smiled more, spoke with more confidence, and even dreamed about what he could do when he grew up. One afternoon, while watching his mother talk with Evelyn in the garden, he said, "I never thought I could live like this. It's like a dream." Evelyn, who was beside him, placed a hand on his shoulder and smiled. "You deserve all of this, Ethan, and the best is yet to come." Evelyn had always believed that powerful stories could inspire real change, and Ethan's courage was one of those stories. Determined to turn the boy's heroic gesture into something that could impact many other lives, she began planning a grand event. Within a few days, she used her vast network of contacts to organize a meeting at her own mansion, inviting businesspeople, philanthropists, and leaders of social organizations. Everyone received a personalized invitation, in which Evelyn promised to present a story that would change the way they viewed the reality of homeless children. On the night of the event, the mansion was immaculate, illuminated by soft lights that highlighted its classic architecture. Elegantly decorated tables were set up in the main hall, while waiters circulated with trays of canapes and drinks. But the focus of the night was not on luxury, but on Ethan's story. When all the guests were seated, Evelyn stepped up to the small stage set up in the hall. With a microphone in hand and a warm smile on her face, she began. "Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here. Tonight is not about me or this house. It is about a boy who taught me the true meaning of courage and kindness." She then recounted, in detail, the encounter in Central Park, Ethan's bravery in confronting a mugger, and the humility with which he simply asked for help to save his mother. Ethan didn't want money, luxury, or recognition. All he wanted was to give his sick mother a chance to live. And he did this with a maturity and strength that few of us can imagine. Today, Ethan and Sarah are with me, and their lives are changing. But they're just two among millions of people who need our help. At the end of her speech, Evelyn asked Ethan to come up to the stage. The boy, visibly nervous, wore a simple suit that Evelyn had tailored for him. Looking out at the audience full of well-dressed and attentive people, he felt his hands sweat, but Evelyn firmly squeezed his shoulder, encouraging him. "I don't know much to say," he began, his voice low. "I just want to thank Ms. Evelyn for everything she has done for me and my mom. And I want to say that there are many boys like me out there, trying to do what is right, but needing help. If we can do anything for them, it would be amazing." Ethan's simple words touched the hearts of everyone in the hall, and the applause that followed was long and warm. Inspired by the story, the business people present began discussing ways to contribute. By the end of the night, Evelyn announced the creation of a fund with initial contributions from her guests to support homeless children. The goal would be to provide access to education, healthcare, and opportunities for a better future. Ethan, as the symbol of this campaign, became the face of a new hope. His name and story now represented a larger movement aimed at changing lives across the country. But Evelyn had more surprises in store for Ethan. A few days later, she called him in for a private conversation in her office. "Ethan," she began, smiling, "you have the potential for incredible things. I want you to know that I have taken care of everything for you to attend one of the best schools in the city. You will have a full scholarship with everything paid for, so you can study and follow your dreams." Ethan was speechless. He looked at Evelyn, trying to understand what this meant. "You wanted to go to a real school? A good school?" Evelyn chuckled softly and nodded. "Exactly, kid. I want you to have the tools to do everything you've always dreamed of. Who knows, one day, you might become the doctor you mentioned." Ethan felt his eyes fill with tears. He had never dared to believe that something like this would be possible. "Thank you," he said, his voice choked. "I promise I won't let you down." When classes began, Ethan found himself in a completely new world. The school was modern, with well-equipped classrooms, science labs, and attentive teachers. For the first time, he had access to books, computers, and resources he had only heard about before. He quickly stood out, not only for his dedication, but also for his story, which inspired both classmates and teachers. 2 years had passed since the day Ethan, with a branch in his hands and courage in his heart, faced the mugger in Central Park. Time had transformed his life in ways he could never have imagined. At 14, he was now a confident young man, standing out in school for both his grades and his determination. His teachers often praised his curiosity and work ethic, while his peers admired him for his kindness and leadership. Ethan was no longer the shy and insecure boy who lived on the streets. He was someone with concrete dreams and, more importantly, the tools to achieve them. Sarah, for her part, was completely healthy. She had regained not only her physical strength, but also her joy for life. Now, she was working on a social project led by Evelyn to support families in vulnerable situations, helping other mothers facing challenges similar to those she had known so well. The relationship between Sarah, Ethan, and Evelyn had strengthened to the point that they considered themselves a true family. On a sunny spring day, Ethan decided to visit Central Park, the place where it all began. He walked along the familiar trails, observing the joggers and tourists passing by, the street musicians playing cheerful melodies, and the children laughing as they ran across the lawn. The fresh air and vibrant sounds of the park reminded him of who he was and how much he had changed. He stopped at a bench near the spot where he had first met Evelyn. He sat down and closed his eyes for a moment, letting the memories flow. He remembered the daily struggle to survive, the looks of disdain he received, and the determination he felt while collecting cans to buy his mother's medication. He recalled the fear and courage that mixed when he decided to confront the mugger. And above all, he remembered how everything changed that day, thanks to the kindness of a woman who saw something special in him. As he was lost in thought, he heard a familiar voice behind him. "It seems you found the perfect place to reflect, haven't you, Ethan?" He turned around and saw Evelyn, smiling gently. She was elegant as always, but there was something more in her expression, a serenity and warmth that seemed to radiate from her. Ethan smiled and stood up, going to meet her. "I wanted to come back here," he said, looking around. "This place changed my life. It was here that it all began." Evelyn nodded and offered her arm for him to accompany her. Together, they began to walk through the park, side by side. The silence between them was not uncomfortable. It was filled with understanding, as if they didn't need words to express what they felt. After a few minutes, Ethan broke the silence. He held Evelyn's hand with the same firmness and gratitude he felt in his heart. "You know, I saved your life that day," he began, his voice low but full of emotion. "But you saved mine and my mother's forever. Everything we are today, everything we have achieved, is thanks to you." Evelyn stopped walking and turned to him, her eyes shining with tears she didn't bother to hide. With one hand, she caressed his face, as a proud grandmother would. "And you, Ethan, gave me a new reason to live. Before I met you, I lived to hold on to everything I had. But you showed me that true wealth lies in sharing, in changing lives. You brought purpose to my days." They stayed like that for a moment, looking at each other with deep and sincere affection. Then they resumed walking. The horizon opened up before them, with the afternoon sun painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. The leaves of the trees swayed gently in the wind, and the sound of laughter and music filled the air. Ethan and Evelyn stopped at the top of a small hill, where they could see almost the entire park. They both stood in silence, absorbing the moment, their silhouettes bathed in sunlight. They were happy, filled with hope, and aware that their lives were irrevocably linked by an act of courage and kindness. Their story was not just about rescues or paybacks. It was about how an unexpected encounter could change not just one life, but many. It was about the power of love, generosity, and faith in one another. As they looked toward the horizon, a promising future unfolded before them, full of new possibilities.
If you enjoyed this story, subscribe to the channel and leave a like. These other stories will also move you. Click to continue watching.